Hello, my name is Tim, and this Spotlight talk is about our paper Simple Sensor Intentions for Exploration. This work was done in the context of scheduled auxiliary control, which is a multitask learning approach in which auxiliary tasks are learned alongside a main goal task, and these auxiliary tasks facilitate exploration towards the main goal task. Scheduled auxiliary control has two main ingredients. The first is shared data, which means that the transition distribution for which the policies and the queue functions are learned is obtained from a replay buffer that is filled by executing the policy for the goal task as well as all other auxiliary policies. The second ingredient is the sequencing of intentions, which means that episodes are subdivided into multiple sequences and the policy to execute is chosen for each sequence. Like that, scheduled auxiliary control can achieve high data efficiency, which makes it fit for learning complex tasks completely from scratch on real robot systems as long as the auxiliary tasks help with exploration. An important insight of scheduled auxiliary control, however, is that the exact definition of the auxiliary tasks isn't all that important as long as they jointly lead to adequate exploration. Previously, however, auxiliaries were usually chosen specific to the goal task, often with a lot of hand engineering and with domain knowledge encoded in the reward definition. When aiming for generality, a challenge here is to find auxiliary tasks that do not require a lot of domain or task-dependent prior knowledge, but that still provide for sufficient exploration to also learn complex tasks in a variety of domains. With simple sensor intentions, we wanted to take a step in this direction. The basic idea is that in the absence of an external reward signal, a sensible exploration strategy can be formed by learning auxiliary policies that deliberately cause an effect on the observed sensor values. What we aim for example, is to learn a policy that takes actions in order to deliberately increase or decrease the reading of a touch sensor. That obviously has a manifestation in the real world. A robot might learn to grasp an object. But the reward formulation itself is still general in the sense that it doesn't require a semantic understanding of the concrete environment. The idea targets scalar sensors obviously, but not all robot sensors are scalar. In particular, camera images do not readily fit in this scheme. We can use a very simple approach, however, for transferring images into a representation that can then be used instead. We threshold the images with a bracket of the U-range to derive a mask, and from this mask we compute the distribution of active pixels along both of the image axes. We can then treat the means of these distributions as a scalar representation of that U-range on which SSIs can be applied. That loosely translates to rewarding an agent for increasing or decreasing the mean position of that specific color range along one of the image axes. We use this auxiliary setup for learning to grasp and lift a colored block. Early in training, the SSIs will encourage the agent to push the block in a basket, and later the agent will learn to grasp the block and eventually also learns to lift the object. The very same auxiliary setup can be used with a much more complex goal task, stacking two blocks, which is a very hard exploration problem. Using only SSIs as auxiliaries, the task can be learned successfully as well. When dealing with images, we're not limited to a single color range. If we do the pre-processing outlined earlier for U brackets covering the whole U range, we can treat the means of these distributions as a representation of the whole image, on which SSIs can then be applied to. Now, depending on the use case, however, another formulation can also be interesting, in particular if we want to keep the number of auxiliary tasks low. We can total the rewards for changing individual color channels to form an aggregate SSI. And this loosely translates to rewarding the agent for changing or moving whatever colored thing can be changed or moved in the environment. This approach was used in an experiment on a real robot, again learning from scratch purely from pixels and proprioception. The goal task is to lift the object placed in the basket, and since we used the aggregate SSI formulation here, we were able to swap out the object during training, with the agent eventually learning a policy to approach, grasp and lift arbitrary objects placed in the basket. To show the generality of SSIs, we employed the same set of auxiliaries we used before when learning to lift the green block, and we applied them to the ball in a cup task, with the SSIs now targeting the yellowish color of the ball. Early in training, the agent learns to swing the ball, which facilitates exploration for eventually learning to catch the ball with the cup. This as well is trained completely from scratch, purely from pixels and proprioception. In summary, with simple sensor intentions, we propose a reward scheme for defining auxiliary tasks that reduces the amount of prior knowledge required and that is generic and can be applied to a broad range of domains. SSIs can be computed from raw sensor streams, require none or only little task-specific engineering, and thus transfer easily to new domains and tasks. Further, we could show empirically that SSIs work well in different domains and that SSIs provide for sufficient exploration to also learn difficult tasks.